Well, while we're trying to figure this out, and I'll just proceed. And, I want to just say how grateful I am to be here with you. And today I want to hold this in a way as more of an inquiry and less of a teaching. And I think in part because I've been very um, oh, touched, moved, concerned about the state of the world. And I'm sure all of us online feel the same. And also the death of Navalny and watching, his funeral in Moscow and the very brave people who, thousands showing up, really with a kind of cri de coeur, a cry for freedom. And that cry, I think, is also heard in my country and in many countries of the world where there's such complexity politically, and also we're facing such an untimely spring here in the Southwest, feeling really the depth and breadth of the climate catastrophe. And the Texas Panhandle just blown into vast fire. Tens of thousands of acres burnt to the ground. Well, here we are in this. And, in this regard, I think most of you know, I've been involved in as a social activist and environmental activist for a long time, and also a practitioner since the mid-60s. And I was thinking a lot recently about, what brings so many people to practice, which is their suffering, the individual suffering. But there's a point that I have come to very deeply, and it is that my relationship with the truth of suffering of others. And I'm wanted to share some words from Bell Hooks in this regard. She says, I'm often struck by the dangerous narcissism fostered by spiritual rhetoric that pays so much attention to individual self-improvement and so little to the practice of love within the context of community. And from my point of view, that community is not only the community that you and I are close to in terms of the two-leggeds. It's family, the Sangha, our neighborhood, our co-workers, our sort of in-group. But it's the realization of fundamental interbeing, the community of all species. Every species on this earth is affected, even the tardigrades, the most resilient, strange little beings, but really are affected by what is happening on our earth today. And in this regard, I think of Navalny's words that we're not allowed to give up. We're here together in an inflection point in our world. And honestly, I'm so grateful that we're touching in. I will share, I did and do have on occasion moments of feeling quite crushed by what is happening in our world today, but also that spirit that Navalny says, we're not allowed to give up, that is very much present in my life, and pretty much how I live my life, knowing that the moments when I do feel the heaviness in my heart. That heaviness, in a way, is not only the ballast, but the actual juice that keeps me showing up. Yeah. So I know this is a little out of order. We'll do our meditation, but I'd love to just connect with you and to see what is present for you, what is alive in you right now. And if you would just put a few words into the chat, that would be super, so I could just get a feeling for how you are and who is here. So, and I'm just seeing if you all, is the chat open, Jorge? Ah, okay. Thank you for that. Great. Let me just, I just, I love Zoom because I can reach out through time and space, but also I'm kind of miss warm hand to warm hand, and this helps me get a sense of who is present. And I see many friends from New Mexico actually are, yes, are present, and from the Netherlands and New Zealand, and my good friend Rose Gordon from up in Taos. Hey, Rose, so good to see you. And a lot of people from London. And you have to extend the Zoom room to more than 100. There are 100 here. I don't know. So I guess today we are lucky we get to be just 100, not the 500. I guess that there's an actual limit, and so forth. That's fine. Just so I'll just let my friends know. So what's alive in you right now? Fear, coexisting with gratitude and hope, right? I can really relate. Resigned and hopeful and sad. And then Nita says, I'm just out of words because of the state of the world. Wonderful. I can really relate. But anyway, you are expecting some words from me today. So yeah. Yeah, someone has just written, Mayun says, there are dark clouds in Europe, and those clouds extend to our country, and our country is actually darkening those clouds. And Rose says, all acts of kindness are lights in the war for justice. Exactly. Very wonderful. So thank you for your comments. I'll return to them. And what I'd like to invite us to do is to drop in, knowing so that it's just we're so easily distracted in our busy lives, and it really can wear us down, and also ruminating over the state of the world. And what this practice, and meditation is a word like sport. It covers many different dimensions. And in a way, Zazen, which is what we do here at Upaya, is not meditation. It is just sitting. But because I'm online and in various classes I teach, I do go to language, I do go to structure, yeah, which is very different than what we do in the Zendo. But in working with familiarizing ourselves with our mental continuum, what we can learn how to do is to not be caught in the grip of distractions, but actually to be completely present to whatever is arising, not only in our subjective experience, but also within the context of our lived experience. And I think this is really important. This is not just a familiarization with our subjectivity, which reinforces our selfness, but it is to see ourselves as not separate from the environment in which we are practicing in this very moment. So what I want us to begin with is bringing our attention actually to the breath in the body. And it's interesting because you're bringing something from the environment into your subjective experience, your physical experience. But this allows us to settle to some degree into a sense of trust and of greater ease within ourselves. So I invite us, please let yourself settle into your seat, onto your cushion, wherever you are. And be comfortable. If you're in a chair, I encourage you, if your feet and legs aren't crossed in your chair, in a kind of meditation posture, I invite you to put both of your feet flat on the floor. And your eyes can be open, wide, or somewhat open or closed, whatever is most comfortable for you, whatever's going to invite you most into settling. And breath deep in the body. And for a moment, remember really why you are in this connection right now of practice. What is important for you? And from the perspective of my tradition, it's not just about feeling better. It is bringing your whole being into this deep commitment to end suffering in this world, in the lives of others, and in your own life. You know, and so often I bring to mind some person or a place or a situation where I feel really a tug in the heart. I see the images of men and women in the front lines of freezing Ukraine, endeavoring to protect their nation. Or sitting beside a good friend who just died recently, as she was in the midst of struggling to just utter a word in her experience of stroke. You know, and touching into our motivation and intention is really important in this practice. And let that sensibility move into the background of your awareness. And now notice the sensation of your body just sitting. The support of your feet on the floor, your sits bones on the chair or cushion. And let yourself relax into whatever posture you feel cultivates the qualities of mind and heart and body. That give you a sense of presence, of dignity, and of connection. And this body is sitting. It's also breathing. And allow yourself to take a few deep breaths. Really feel the sensation of the in-breath and the sensation of the exhale. And if you find yourself distracted, that's completely normal. We're kind of built for distraction. And see if you can invite yourself back. Simply bring your attention to rest lightly on the breath in the body. Feel the body sitting. Feel this body sitting in this place where you are. Breath deep in the body. And allow your awareness now to include the context, the setting where you are, the space around your body, and the objects in this space. And be aware that not only your body, your mind, and wherever you are, moment by moment, there are subtle changes. Like, for example, there were birds just singing outside my window. Now they're silent, but the sound of wind is present. Notice where you are and notice the flow of change as you experience what you are and where you are. Again, not judging, not analyzing. Simply allow yourself to drop into the flow of change, moment by moment. thoughts and feelings are changing, but through the medium of your sense organs. So also, exactly where you are now, there are subtle or great changes. This is one of the most important practices. Coming into relationship with the truth of impermanence. Sometimes the changes feel blessed, and sometimes they feel tragic. And how do you and I uphold ourselves in the midst of all the changes that are part of our moment by moment experience? Now, gently bring your attention back to the sensation of the breath in the body. Not grasping, but being mindful of this breath in this body. And as we conclude this short meditation practice of mind, breath, body, setting, and space, whatever moment that has been easeful for you, or that you have seen more deeply, please dedicate it to the welfare of others. Thank you so much. So earlier last year, sometime last year, I was living, in a practice community. I still am in the practice community, but I was thinking so intently on how mindfulness is very essential in our practice. Smriti being, very much in the here and now, if you know what I'm saying. But also there, from the point of view of what is happening in our world today, a word that I had heard many years ago became a kind of call for me, and that was Appamada. And I've referenced that word many times over the past 6 or 8 months, because I feel that the spirit of Appamada is so essential at this time. And I appreciate so much how challenging it is for us in this landscape of high distractibility to drop into, allow ourselves to be energized by or informed by this process called Appamada. I'm saying it's a process, not a quality, although it would commonly be called a quality. And then I remembered when Stephen Batchelor was here, he had talked a lot about Appamada. I really appreciated so much his remarks on this process. And in beginning to parse the term Appamada, he wrote this in an article on Appamada. He says, the difficulty with this term of Appamada is expressed by the fact that different translators in different Buddhist traditions can actually agree on what is the best word in English. And then he says, some of the terms which we may have come across include vigilance, diligence, heedfulness, and conscientiousness. Then he mentions a German translator, Ernst Steinkleiner, and he apparently translated Appamada as waksame or sorga, which means wakeful or watchful. And then Stephen made the point that I think is really important. And he said sorga means something like care or concern. So watchful concern or watchful care. And that is quite close to what we mean by the term conscientiousness. And so I've used these two terms interchangeably. I particularly, though, appreciate Stephen translating Appamada as care. Honestly, it has to do with some quality of right attention or right mindfulness, a kind of attentiveness where we are non-distracted, we aren't foggy, where there's a quality of precision. But the word care points to something that is really important. Vigilance has a little bit of sort of fear aggression in it, diligence, dudiness. And I feel like care and conscientiousness capture at least the sensibility of Appamada that I think is so important for us today. And I was remembering a few rohatsus ago when we went back to having people on site, not so many people as we used to, because we're keeping the numbers down again because of COVID. But I remember my good friend Monchen was sitting in an inner row and right across from me. And the way she folded the cloths around her oryoki bowls was really, so careful. And then when she laid the drying cloth on top of the bowls and put her hand on the drying cloth, I was it was such a simple gesture. I'm sure she did not feel observed, but the gesture was one of conscientiousness and care. Conscientiousness and care. Something as simple as a drying cloth. The way she touched it was so free of aggression and so actualized in terms of interbeing, of non-separation. And as I saw her do this, the word Appamada arose in my experience. Yes, right mindfulness or right attention. There's something kind of strict about that. But it goes back to what I shared from Bell Hooks. It was as I saw her do this, an act of connection, an act of love, an act of respect. And it was not done, as I said, to impress others, but it was actually done in such a way that I could feel the ease and openness and clarity, or I could sense into what I think was ease, openness, and clarity in that gesture. Now, recently, I was in the Bay Area visiting another very close friend who had gone in for a procedure and gone back home. And the friend, something went wrong medically, went back to the hospital, had a heart attack actually, and was in a coma for almost a month and slowly waking up out of this coma. And again, sitting at his bedside last week, again, that same sensibility in retrospect arose for me as I sat with my old friend. And as I laid my hand gently on his arm, neither to reassure or to control, but actually to, in this spontaneous gesture, to pre-consciously affirm interbeing, interconnectedness, non-separation. And I appreciate so much going back to the Pali Canon and reflecting on the Appamada Sutra. So I'm just going to share a little bit from the sutra directly. And I love this image. This is from the Appamada Sutra. To the extent that there are animals, footless, two-footed, four-footed, many-footed, with form or formless, percipient, non-percipient, or neither percipient nor non-percipient, the Tathagata, worthy and rightly self-awakened, is reckoned the foremost among them. In the same way, all skillful qualities are rooted in heedfulness, converge in heedfulness, and heedfulness is reckoned the foremost among them. Just as the footprints of all legged animals are encompassed by the footprint of the elephant, and the elephant's footprint is reckoned the foremost among them in terms of size, in the same way, all skillful qualities are rooted in heedfulness, converge in heedfulness, and heedfulness is reckoned the foremost among them. So this is such a really profound perspective, that all of the different mental qualities and processes that are cultivated in the experience of meditation only come into full realization through the medium of Appamada, through the medium of Appamada. So the sutra goes on, he says, just as the rafters in a peak-roofed house all go to the roof peak, incline to the roof peak, converge at the roof peak, and the roof peak is reckoned the foremost among them. In the same way, all skillful qualities are rooted in heedfulness. And we'll change the terms. How about this? All skillful qualities are rooted in care and conscientiousness, converge in care and conscientiousness. And care and conscientiousness are reckoned the foremost among them. Appamada. And so the sutra proceeds with one metaphor after another. It's a beautiful series of metaphors. And we know that Appamada is so often associated with right mindfulness, but as I've said, every quality or every process in the Eightfold Path of the Buddha, the teaching in the Four Noble Truths, is characterized fundamentally in the sort of ground of its being by Appamada. Appamada is throughout the Eightfold Path. So just going to the threefold training, for example, of Sila, Samadhi, Prajna, there's no Sila. There's no precepts without Appamada. Appamada is the very foundation of our precepts. And these precepts are not just intrapsychic, they're interpersonal, they're interbeing. Samadhi, Appamada, makes samadhi possible. Conscientiousness and care, this kind of brightness in the practice. And prajna, the third fold in the threefold training of wisdom. Appamada and wisdom are not separate from each other. In a certain way, you know, when I began to explore this experience of Appamada, what it is to be in a quality of body, heart, and mind that is not distracted. Just as sitting with my friend last week in the Bay Area, resting in my breath, holding his hand, touching his arm, resting in the silence, listening deeply to his words, not as a performance at all, but going back to bell hooks, really out of love. Because from my point of view, Appamada is an expression of love. It's the frame of reference, if you will, that we're operating out of as bodhisattvas or aspiring bodhisattvas. Appamada allows us to see, you know, what our view of reality is. And also what our motivation is. And I want to say a little bit more about motivation and intention and so forth. But I look at Appamada, care and conscientiousness, as the very fundamental of what it means to develop our character in the direction of integrity. So I want to just, you know, I think you get the feeling of how important this process is or has become for me. You know, living in a practice community and having, you know, so many wonderful new practitioners here in the midst at Upaya, and to not sort of lay a trip on them, like be heedful, be vigilant, you know, which I think is, you know, it's okay. But bringing this sensibility of care and of conscientiousness as we move about our monastery grounds, as we prepare our food, as we sweep the walks, as we eat our food, as we are present in the zendo, as we close the door quietly when we enter the Zendo and so forth, this kind of care and conscientiousness. Why would we bother? Why is this important? And of course, it is, at least from my perspective, and I believe that from the point of view of the Buddha, also really important. Also, Stephen Batchelor, my old friend, important for him, because it represents a relationship with our lived experience that is characterized by nonviolence, fundamental non-harming nonviolence. Again, going back to Bell Hooks, her admonition to us, her encouragement of us to turn toward love. And again, looking at Appamada as that skillful means for doing exactly that. In this regard, I want to say a few words about intentionality and our motivation. And I remember Thupten Jinpa, who was His Holiness's translator for many, many years, once wrote about motivation. He said, it's the kind of reason or reasons behind our behavior. And he made a very important point, and I've been thinking so intensively about this recently, that motivation actually is a geography that is often not in our awareness. It is pre-conscious. I think this is very important because intention is conscious. It is, what we are tending toward, reaching toward. But motivation relates to values, to our values. And those values are often not in our conscious awareness. And what we endeavor to do through the medium of Appamada, through conscientiousness and care, is to create the conditions where we are able to access our motivation or our motivations for practice, for being in life, for the vocation that we have chosen, for how we are in the world. Practice allows us to actually move beneath our intentions to this deeper level. Again, surfacing the values that are actually feeding into our motivation. And we do this through conscientiousness, through a quality of mindful attention to what our experience is in this moment, allowing ourselves to settle deeply into a state where we are internally safe, able to connect with whatever our experience is in any given moment. And of course, I've said something about intention. That is, in a certain way, the next level of the geography of why we do things. And the word intention has the French Latin root is intendere, which means fundamentally to stretch. So this experience of our intention, what is our intention? And we say something like, it has a sense of purposefulness into it. It is a sense of deliberateness in it. So in our practice, from the Mahayana perspective, we use the bodhisattva vow. I vow to attain awakening or realize awakening in order to benefit all beings. So this is our intention. But our intention is not realized without the next level, if you will, of geography, and that is commitment. I confer or affirm my intention through this commitment to staying with the practice, to sitting in the charnel grounds, to not turning away from suffering and not turning away from joy. And I have this sense of confirming it with my whole being. And Appamada has also within it this sense of deep commitment, bringing conscientiousness and care into what we have committed to, that no matter what happens in our individual life, I vow lifetime after lifetime to keep this commitment. And this brings us to the sort of fourth geography, and that is living by vow. So the feeling, in my tradition is, this bodhisattva vow that invites us to practice forever for the sake of all beings. And Ehe Dogen has called this continuous practice. And then I think Stephen would add, continuous practice that is conscientious and also characterized by care. And it's to also understand from the Zen perspective that practice here means a practice that is not only for, but also with others. Very much in the sort of sensibility of Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching on interbeing. There's no other kind of practice than that. So I ask us, how do we actualize in our experience of practice the sensibility of conscientiousness and care? How do we actualize this in realizing decenteredness as distinct from selfishness? And in what way can Appamada actually support this realization of decenteredness, of interbeing? I think this is an important question for us to ask ourselves at this time. And particularly since so many of us are in the grip of confusion, of extreme empathic distress as we look at what's happening in this horrendous situation in Gaza and in relation to Israel, of really not being able to, in my country, who are, funding this horrendous situation. What can we do? How do we stay steady and not bypass? But how do we actualize conscientiousness and care in the midst? And recently I read a poem by James Cruz, which I want to share right here, because again, what suffering can do is both it can develop character and strength within us, but it also can absolutely flatten out our lives. our capacity to meet the world, just crush us. And yet, in the crushing, there is teaching. So I want to share this poem before we move on to the questions. And then, it's called Kintsugi Again. And if you read my book, Standing at the Edge, I've got a whole piece on kintsugi because I think this is such an important notion. And this poem is by James Cruz. In the Japanese art of mending ceramic with powdered gold, no one ever talks about how they'd leave the pots, cups, and cracked bowls broken for a while, sometimes whole generations. And so I say to you, let your heart stay shattered in your chest. Let it ache. Some might claim you've now been broken open and can let in the light. This might be true, but before you rush to gloss over the wounds, filling the holes with gold so they glimmer, try to find beauty in the broken places too, proof of where the fire left its. I want to read it again. In the Japanese art of mending ceramic with powdered gold, no one ever talks about how they'd leave the pots, cups, and cracked bowls broken for a while, sometimes whole generations. And so I say to you, let your heart stay shattered in your chest. Let it ache. Some might claim you've been broken open and can let in the light. This might be true, but before you rush to gloss over the wounds, filling the holes with gold so they glimmer, try to find beauty in the broken places too, proof of where the fire left its marks on you. Again, going back to bell hooks. Don't turn away from the truth of suffering, and do not turn away from love. Let this time that we're in bring us to greater awareness and practice, and to loving and brave action in the world. And to find also, after we have been in the churn of the crush, at the right time, to find beauty in the broken places. It takes commitment to do that. It takes conscientiousness to do that, and it takes care to let ourselves be worked by suffering and to find the beauty in the broken places, the proof of where the fire left its mark on you. Knowing that, as Navalny said, in a certain way, don't give up. You're not allowed to give up. You have to stay, as Glassman Roshi encouraged us so often, to learn to sit strongly in the charnel grounds. But being conscientious and being in the spirit of care, to know how to actualize self-stewardship, conscientiousness and care in relation to one's own presence in the field of suffering. So we're working that edge, that fine edge, all of the time. And what brings it really into our lives more clearly is allowing our motivation to become more visible to us, to explore our values, to have an intention that is characterized by conscientiousness and care, to commit deeply to that intention and to live by vow. So I want to finish this talk with one more poem. As I said, what I'm exploring with you today really is come out of a period of touching into the truth of suffering, really through old age, sickness, and death of good friends, but also looking at what is happening in our world in terms of our climate and in terms of the 32 wars raging on our planet on this very day. And this is a poem by Amir Peter O'Loughlin, and he says, "What I do in the war. Because I cannot carry your dead child, I sweep the deck of my friend and fling the dry pine needles to the messenger breeze. And the strike of my broom down the steps to the sea is the shovel for digging the grave. And the bird song is the keening of your family and clinging companions. Instead of joining you to claw the rubble in search of your buried mother, I will bring bread to my neighbor, who will serve it to her children. And I chant your name in rhythm to the shouts and earth movers, with the warm loaf in my hand and the autumn air gripping my chest. I will serve tea to this welcome company and offer a fragrant, poignant, impotent wish for peace. And salam alaikum with each touch of the cup to silent lips, while you grip your phone for news and prepare to sleep on dark roads, upon carpets that once had homes. Nothing in me can help you know if your daughter is alive or dead, or which of those is worse. So I will whisper, Bashalom, Bashalom, with each step up this mountain, from where my strength comes and where my cries are left, and where the eagles loft and lift. You cannot bear witness to my sorrow for those I love whom I do not know. So I will ring the Japanese garden bell to reach all those unjustly taken away. I will listen to its resounding song, which ears hear for 10 slow breaths, but which trees hear forever. And I pledge to each of you who suffers now a place in my vibrating prayer." And he wrote this October 14, 2023, Main Island, British Columbia. So I offer that because I know so many feel so helpless. So many feel so confused. And yet we have to live in that helplessness. And we have to live with that confusion in a way that is characterized by Appamada, conscientiousness, and care. So thank you for listening, and I'm very grateful that we had this time together. And someone asked who wrote it. His name is Amir Peter O'Loughlin. What I Do in the War. So I'd like to open our session, if that's all right, to any questions, concerns, insights that you would like to share. And I'm just gonna, okay, I'm gonna get, let's see.
Yes, Victoria Martino wants to speak, so
Yes, please, Victoria.
open your
Thank
mic.
you. Thank you so much for this beautiful, beautiful talk, Roshi Joan. It's really a privilege to be with you. And I think it's such an important subject. I wanted to, it's a little unformed because I wasn't ready. It just came up in my head, so it's still a slightly unformed thought. But I was in a class yesterday with Lee Brasington and the Sati Center, and it was an ongoing class. And somebody in the discussion afterwards was talking about the difference between in the Theravada tradition, the idea of, well, of course, the Buddha taught, I teach dukkha and the end of dukkha. But somebody in our Sangha brought up the idea, which made me really start thinking about it. I'd love to hear you share a little bit about it. The difference, of course, there are many different paths in Buddhism, as we know. And I really always love the Bodhisattva vow. It's not my tradition, but I embrace it because every word in it speaks to my heart. And this person brought up the idea of this incredible commitment in the Bodhisattva vow to actually endure dukkha. In trying to, again, I'm sorry if it's incoherent. When we all aspire to the end of dukkha, insofar as we aspire to nibbana, or the cooling off, or enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it. But this commitment to stay in the dukkha for the sake of others, for the sake of love, for the sake of the healing of our interbeing. And that really resonated with me. And unfortunately, in the discussion, it moved right on to some other, more conceptual question. But it was in my heart. And then just hearing you speak now, I thought, what a beautiful kind of synchronicity for me to hear you talk about the Bodhisattva vow. And I would love if you could maybe parse that out a little bit more in the sense of our in this context of the Appamada, that it's love, it's this interbeing and love and commitment and the conscientious and care, how that all ties in while we are all living in this state of dukkha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I wish one thought that came up for me just immediately was, I remember one time I was in Plum Village, and Thich Nhat Hanh said very clearly, suffering is not enough.
Mm.
And I thought, oh, that's a really good line. You could say, yeah, suffering is not enough. But also, in the bodhisattva world, bodhisattvas do not seek easy situations. In other words, it's not the spa life, so to speak. Bodhisattvas are always in response to the lived experience of connecting with suffering, with the aspiration to benefit others. And, that actually I see throughout the early Buddhist canon. This is what the Buddha taught. It just took another spin in the Mahayana world. And actually, the 4 vows of the Bodhisattva were crafted by the founder of the Tendai sect, Chi Yi, who in the 6th century, and those vows are really powerful in the sense that, the first is sentient beings, but we translated it as creations are numberless. I vow to free them. that includes the suffering, our greed, hatred, delusion in our own minds. So I think, it's to understand, we're constantly actually, we're just human beings. I've seen great teachers fall into sadness, depression, anger, and even be a little greedy. So, we're all just human beings. We all have feet of clay. But the constant work is, to bring ourselves back to to this experience of Appamada, of conscientiousness and care, and to liberate. Okay, so, I was confused. Learn from your confusion. What is that teaching me now? And free yourself from that confusion or others. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow actually the Chinese translation is to stop them. But I said to Bernie when we were working on the 4 vows, I said, and he sort of disagreed with me. We had a discussion about it. And so we sort of settled on, I vow to transform them, because that's what bodhisattvas do. It's, no mud, no lotus, right? So, I mean, our humanness that's the very edge where our humanity arises. And then reality is boundless from the point of view not only of interbeing and interconnectedness, but also just, the vastness of emptiness of space. And the awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. So, it's in my lived experience. And this is, this is though those 4 vows were, as I said, they're based on the 4 noble truths. Creations are numberless, suffering, first one, delusions, the root of suffering, are inexhaustible. And it's the 4 noble truths. That's a wonderful iteration from the bodhisattva perspective, an impossible assignment. So it's not knowing it's impossible to create, free all creations. You are in this kind of heart of humility. You do the best you can. And there's, this feeling, again, of conscientiousness, not of perfectionism. But also, Bernie would say, how important it is to sit in the charnel grounds. But Thich Nhat Hanh and Dogen and Kaz Tanahashi and I all say, also the vitamin of joy and ease, really important.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh.
It feeds care. So I just encourage that.
Right. I think that's so important because I've heard a number of Dharma talks lately from teachers whom I really respect and admire, but they've perhaps inadvertently, perhaps deliberately gone totally down what I would consider a negative road of all the ills and sufferings in our society without that nourishment of joy and hope and love and continuing in the continuing on the path, knowing that we need to be, that we're not perfect, that we are human, that we need to be nourished, or we can't continue the work. We just don't have the strength. So I really appreciate that balance that you brought in your talk. One other thing I was just curious about, I love this idea, I love that poem about the, I can't,
Kintsugi.
well, no, the other one.
The other one, what I do in war.
Yes, fabulous, fabulous. And it reminded me immediately of, because I come from the Christian tradition, and it reminded me of Brother Lawrence and Saint Teresa of Avila, both of whom said it's easier to pray. Brother Lawrence said it's easier to pray when I'm peeling potatoes or washing the dishes than when I'm in the chapel. And of course, Saint Teresa of Avila famously said, God is in the pots and pans, which is essentially the same statement. And I've always felt that that's a very empowering thing too, that we are not going to give up. We are going to continue to love and to care and to do what we can to heal the world within our own small, or like Mother Teresa said, grow where you're planted. But that it reduces that sense of powerlessness and helplessness, which can lead so easily into depression and despair. And I'm speaking from experience. I'm not being didactic here. That sense of it's too much. What can I do? And I love that idea that just do the next thing. What is possible for you? And I just thank you for sharing that. It really is so nourishing. And anyway, I just want to bow to your wisdom and your love, and thank you.
Well, you're also bowing to my struggles. Yeah, again, I think what Belle was saying, in the words that I shared at the beginning of the talk is we really have to not turn away from the truth of suffering. And yet at the same time, we have to embody the Four Noble Truths, not just number one.
Right.
And not in the grip of a bypass. And, so I appreciate what you're saying. And also sometimes, no matter, sitting again with this friend of mine last week in this skilled care facility, I couldn't make things better. I probably could have made them worse. I hope I didn't. But I just knew that, it was the right thing to come alongside of this old friend of mine. And I could not be attached to an outcome, but I wanted to give wholeheartedly my full presence as it was. And it wasn't even a thought. It's just, that's what occurred. And my friend Rose Gordon, who's online with us right now, she sits with many dying people, and I'm sure it's the same. We can't control the outcomes, but we can bring our best to whatever situation. And that best is deeply enhanced through Appamada. So Appamada. I just encourage us to really sit and explore how we bring care and conscientiousness forward in our lives with the pots and the pans, a friend who is gravely ill, someone on the edge of death who drops into death that you're coming alongside, or a war that is so ugly and tragic. And someone says, how do we bear our grief for the world? And this is from Liz. And I just say, Liz, we bear it. We are crushed by it. We are taught by it. And we're deepened by it. And it is not for us to turn away from it. How do we bear it? We let grief work us. Let grief work us. So thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Jerome, nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. I recognize your couch.
You recognize my couch, huh? How sweet. Well, I recognize that moment of Appamada when we sat under the tree at University of Santa Barbara in 1997 at Ty's retreat. And I just wanted to acknowledge that was a real experience that I'll cherish for the rest of my life, because you gave me a lot of good advice, a lot of good advice on how to deal with cancer. I was still alive, 27 years later. But I'm wondering, is the friend you visited, was that Frank?
No, Frank is okay. Yeah.
I was worried, totally worried, because he lives near me, and I don't know that I haven't heard from him for a while. So
he's doing fine. I saw him actually when I was on the West Coast. Yeah, I saw him.
I'm glad it's not Frank. Thank you very much.
I am too, dear Frank. Thank you, Jerome, so much. So nice to reconnect. And Deirdre.
Well, thank you, Joan. I've really benefited from your writings. They contain wonderful gifts. Sometimes when I'm meditating recently, physiological processes like the fight, flight, freeze they come in, and I feel blocked by them when I'm sitting, and I feel frustrated and sad that they block kind of an expanded consciousness, my conscientiousness of others and interbeing. Yeah, do you have any advice for this moment? Thank you.
Thanks, Deirdre. Well, I'm just be curious to know what your experience is when you hit that or encounter that threshold, the fear threshold.
Yes, I stay with it. I have the time box. I have it of my my meditation timer, so that helps me. And then I stand up, maybe do my pots and pans, yeah, and come back the next day.
So, one of the wonderful teachings that we received from Thai so many years ago is, when this kind of difficulty confronts us, he uses this metaphor, really coming out of his book Old Path, White Cloud. Mara shows up, which is the devil in the state of mind, and then he'll say, "Well, hello, old friend, I know you." So, I've used that quite a bit over the years. I've had my share of Mara. But also there's another piece, Deirdre, and it's not, Mara in the way Thai does it, then kind of gets grumpy and walks off. But I have another question behind that I think is sometimes helpful. What am I learning from you? What am I learning from you? Or what are you teaching me? So instead of engaging in sort of, walking off the set, so to speak, in distraction, I'd like to just take it a little further in my experience and to see, what is the teaching here that I'm getting? And it's, it sort of infuses an atmosphere of threat with the sense of respect and in connection and engagement and humility and inquiry. Try it out, see if it works. Might not, but it's been helpful to me. Thank you, Deirdre, so much. All right. Leslie, did you have a question? If not, we're kind of, close to the end of our session. And it looks like no more questions. Then let me share just one more thing. I have an old friend named Pico Ayer. He's a wonderful writer and has done so much with the Dalai Lama over the years. And his new book, it's not out yet. It's just extraordinary. It's called A Flame, A Flame. And in part, it's about solitude. And it opens up with this story. And it's a story that I think is particularly important to me right now, as I am in the crosshairs of so many different social and environmental issues. So these are Pico's words. Two men in white robes at the end of the road, high above the empty highway. Quotes, "That fire last October," says one, young and slim, his eyes burning under his shaven head. "It came within 3 miles of us. At one point, our road got blocked and there was no way out. It was radiant." Let me read that sentence again. At one point, our road got blocked and there was no way out. It was radiant. So parenthetically, I was sitting with a friend who has advanced prostate cancer a few days ago. He's been fighting it like the warrior that he is. And I said to him, oh, I'm so sorry that you have been through everything that you've been through. He's all kinds of radiation and chemotherapy and surgery. And it's just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I said. And he looked at me, he said, what do you mean? He said, it's been my greatest teacher. Cancer is my friend. Okay. Pico writes, at one point, our road got blocked and there was no way out. It was radiant. Going back to Victoria's perspective, also what Deirdre was talking about. Pico writes, his older monastic brother says nothing. And the younger monastic continues, for 3 days and nights, Cyprian goes on. The sky was black, like sooty fog all the time. I went down to the last bench on the road and the whole ocean was blood red. Plumes of smoke were rising from the hills. I heard trees exploding. It was incandescent. Pico writes, I don't know what to say. Fire has already left its mark on me. So he's talking about the fact that his own house, his mother's house in Santa Barbara, while he was visiting his mother, was burnt to the ground and his mother escaped. Plus a book he'd been working on for 8 years, just ashes. Pico says, quotes, you pay for your blessings, I venture at last. We do, says the other, burly with gentle eyes. A lot of people don't understand that. They see only the beauty. So, it's this amazing balance. We're not bypassing the sorrow, the anguish, but we're also not turning away from the beauty. And then Pico writes, the beauty, of course, is hard to miss. In the distance, headlands that stretch toward the cities to the south, surf scribbling white around their edges. To our right, a wide expanse of ocean with not a thing to interrupt the blue. A deep valley to our left and dry golden hills from which mountain lions sometimes emerge or their prey. 900 acres of live oak, madrona, redwood, and desert yucca, a quarter of a mile above the sea. I wonder if beauty also always has to carry a trace of mortality. I try, and my two friends are wise enough not to say a word, looking out over the charred hills to the promise all around. So as we observe these wars and sit with the truth of impermanence, as we do what we can to deliver mercifully into the life of these wars, something that is bringing an end to suffering. As we do this, not being attached to outcome, but it's also, there is promise all around. There will be a time when the Mideast comes to peace, when Palestinians and Jews recognize each other as brothers and sisters. There will be a time when this insane, extractive, capitalistic ethos that is raping our earth, this will come to an end. In the meantime, we show up, we work our edge, we do the best that we can. And we live by vow, the 4 vows. So I ask us as we finish this hour and a half together to take a breath and to see what's alive in you right now. and see if you can rededicate your life to being a benefit to all beings. Thank you for your practice.